Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the factions, forces, and faces of the Warhammer 40k universe. The grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. In January, I like to take a short break, work on planning bigger videos, and set my house in order for the coming year. So, I have some very big videos being planned and researched for. I like to be as precise as my servo-skull noggin can manage. Hence, here is a collection of some of the stories from the videos from 2023. I hope you enjoy this as it is intended. A hobby or sleep prop, or for those long commutes. But rest assured, I am working on big pieces that I hope will scratch that itch for a banquet. And, as usual, if you like what you hear and wish to enjoy more, then do hit the like and subscribe buttons, notification too, of course, and leave a comment if you're able. It would be a great boon. Also, check out our other channel on Mythology, links in the description. And now, on to the stories. Chaplain Lucullus walked the corridors of the fortress of Hera with a heavy heart. For this was to be his final test, his ultimate victory or utter defeat. For today, he had his last throw of the dice, and he needed guidance. He stopped at each plinth and sconce, looking up at the statuary the icons of honor and duty celebrated, and he steeled himself for the task at hand. With new vigor, new purpose, he now strode to his destination. Today, he would reclaim a soul for the Emperor. It was rare, but it happened. Chaplain Lucullus found this to be his vocation, his calling. He always found a way. Every now and again, rarely it was true, but sometimes a neophyte could be assailed by the one enemy they could never defeat alone: doubt. When the drill masters and other chaplains had tried and failed, they called upon Lucullus. The drill masters would tire the neophyte out, beast them until they were too fatigued to even think. Then there would be no room for it, for doubt. Yet this had not worked. Some of his colleagues would use fire and brimstone speeches on psalms. They would assault the very core of the neophyte, stripping away every last logical argument the trainee might have. Some would put the fear of the Emperor into them, and often this would work. But in these most uncommon of events, when simply everything bounced off, then, and only then, did they call Lucullus. And he had never failed, not once. He always managed to find the embers inside the soul of the victim, and then to fan them back into a roaring flame of faith and determination, of purpose. Yet this time, he had to admit, he was concerned. Never before had Lucullus been with a neophyte for so long. Never before had he looked into the eyes of one and felt his own faith falter. Yet, with Sextus, he had come close. Sometimes there was a man who led the squad, but did so by being, instead of by shouting or ordering. The kind of man that is not sergeant, lieutenant, or officer, not above any of the others. Yet, they had the very beating heart of the squad. And this was Sextus. He had gone downhill. He had dragged his entire squad down with him, but he said nothing, never complained, never rebelled, never countered arguments or sneered at orders. He did nothing whatsoever to cause such a massive effect. He simply lost hope. He attended, but the light had gone from his eyes. His posture was no less tight or disciplined, his bolter no less polished or accurate. Yet a black cloud surrounded him, and it then cast its shadows over the rest of his brothers. He had lost his faith. and in the space of just a few scant months, his squad went from sullen to melancholy, and action had to be taken. Lucullus had read the file on his previous encounters, his history. Sextus had been an exemplary neophyte, came from the very best stock, a family of renown, was near the perfect blend of rugged determination and yet supple flexibility. He was everything the Ultramarines needed, now more than ever. Yet, it had been during the Plague War, when the forces of chaos had run rampant across even Ultramar. Sextus had seen combat, had distinguished himself, had personally slain a demon with his bare hands after running out of bots. Yet, this was when it happened, where it started. Despite being victorious, the merest existence of Chaos Neverborn had somehow shattered the man, or so it was thought. But it was not fear. This much was easy to discern. Previous interrogations proved he was no coward, was no deviant or degenerate. He had just lost his faith. Not in the divinity of the Emperor either, but in humanity's ability to win. Lucullus had discussed this with him, had delved so deeply into the soul of Sextus that there was not even a single nook or cranny left unexplored. And the neophyte had not resisted or hesitated in all of it. The most deeply personal of questions was met head-on, without flinching, dramatizing, or any form of avoidance. And Lucullus finally had to admit, the boy knew his mind. He believed in the power of the Emperor. Of course he did. Just not in the strength of his subjects. For Sextus was clever, and when he slew what he thought was a Neverborn, he saw that it was inside a human, what many called the possessed. Yet, when the host body was left by this demon, it had a smile on its face. And this is what broke Sextus. The demon did not just dominate this man he wore as a suit. This man had been broken so much that, despite all the horror he had witnessed the demon perform, he had come to enjoy it. He died with a smile on his lips. And so, Lucullus had tried near everything he had ever concocted. He had never had to go to such lengths before. Most would be returned to the light after but one conversation. For Lucullus was indeed a shepherd of the soul. He knew what made his people tick, so he could fix them. Yet with Sextus, he had explored every last avenue he had ever invented, and now, at the last, he felt almost defeated. When he went back into his furthest meditations, when he thought on his first days of his chaplaincy, he found it. That last gambit, the greatest of cards to play, if this did not work. Then Sextus could not be reached, and Lucullus would have failed, let down himself, his chapter, his primarch, his emperor, and his entire race. And so, it was with butterflies in his stomach for the first time in centuries that Lucullus knocked on the door of Sextus. They travelled in utter silence, helms attached, armour on. They never even made eye contact. The neophyte did not even ask to know where they went. He was so lost. Even when they marched to a transport, even when they went into high orbit and took to a new conveyance, even when they spent 3 days flying through the cold darkness of the void, neither spoke. In any other, Lucullus would believe this petulance, or some form of line in the sand that the neophyte could not cross now that they had drawn it themselves. But it was not. Lucullus could see it in Sextus's eyes. He did not ask where they were going, as he simply didn't care anymore. When the ship approached a smaller moon, Lucullus stood and beckoned to the neophyte to join him. The two stood, and looked out of the forward view panel, and the pilot was under very specific prearranged orders. He did his job to perfection. For the moon was cleared, and there she was, with 100 vessels around her, transport, supply ships, escorts, cruisers even, each dwarfed by her majestic bulk. The Marines, both chaplain and neophyte, looked on as their ship went down the very length of her, far enough to see her size, close enough to witness her grandeur. And they both basked in the vision. One of the greatest ships to have ever sailed. She was over a score of miles long, a wonder of technological power, one of only a handful ever made. They both witnessed the full splendor of the Macragge's Honor, the flagship of the Primarch, the Gloriana-class battleship. Lucullus did not even look at his ward as they docked. He did not speak as he walked with Sextus the nearly 30 kilometers of its grand processional, the central corridor that ran the entire length of the vessel. The two walked in silence, witnessing all about them, the banners of old glories, the servitors, technicians, marines, serfs, and stations they passed. When they finally got to the very prow of the ship, again, Lucullus did not speak as he walked to an access hatch. He opened it, and he began to scale a ladder, and the neophyte followed him. Both climbed for over 2 hours up this one tunnel, until they came out into the blackness of the void. And there, Lucullus offered his hand to Sextus to assist him out of the hatch, but also to position him. As the two stood at the top of the prow of the Macragge's Honor and looked down its length, the chaplain then turned and looked up and out at the sun blazing in the distance, and Sextus mimicked him, but he moved slowly, carefully. He was in awe. Lucullus opened his comm and said, "This vessel was forged at the command of the Emperor, gifted to our Gene-sire, the Lord Commander, when both walked amongst us. We have kept her hale and hearty, yet never demurred from her deployment, in all of the years from then until now. For 10,000 years, Sextus. Sextus, tell me again how we are doomed. Tell me again how we cannot win. Tell me again from this holy place. Tell me we are not worthy of the Emperor. And if you can do that, here, before that which you see, if you can do that, then right here, right now, we take off our helms and jump off into the darkness of the void." And at that, the neophyte nodded. He turned back to the ship and basked in its glory, slowly taking one knee as he stated, "I cannot, in the name of the Emperor, in this holy place, will you give me the final vows?" And thus, Lucullus began the litanies, and Sextus became a space marine. And not one moment from that second until his last did he ever doubt again. I had had enough. Each time I returned, they did it again. The pain was excruciating. It did not last long. The same place, the same pyre, with different kindling and fuel. The same spot now burnt a black that could never be removed, never be cleared, where they lit me each time I denied them. The flesh burnt, The muscles bubbled. I was never awake for long enough to even feel hunger. But enough was enough. This time, when the fanatic walked in, I did not spit in his face. I did not glare at him indignantly, bored or even laughing mockingly. This time, I sat cross-legged on the ground and looked him dead in the eye. Then I nodded my head down and up again slowly. "Ready to talk now?" "Had enough," says he. "Just so," I reply. "That took longer than I expected, but we both knew this moment would come." Alas, I did not. I'd never been put to the question by one of your kind. Your methods are simple and direct, but very persuasive indeed. "Do not cheek me, heretic, or we shall have to warm you a few score times again to make certain you know where you sit." I am under no illusion. I am merely unable to lie. This is candour, not flippancy. More's the pity. If I'd been able to confabulate to dissemble, then I would not be sitting here with you. "Aye. The unclean often demands a price that outweighs the gifts they bequeath." "Ah. You believe I'm in league with the malign denizens of the Imperium?" Nothing could be further from the truth, I assure you. Your supple flesh returned each morn is declaration enough, filth. They left you too obvious to be hidden forever. Oh, you would be surprised how long I have been hiding for. Servant of religion. Servant of the god Emperor! No, I am afraid not. Well, come to think of it, perhaps you are now. Right. But it was not always so. Blasphemy! Repent or you shall burn instantly! You aren't going to do that now. We both know that. By all means, you will end me at my conclusion, but you will hear me. I was with him, you see. Whom? You will know soon enough. Then you will buckle. Then you will ask me to stop to save your soul. But then your mind will swim, and you will cry for me to continue or even start again from the beginning. But I won't. And I will keep telling you things about him, until you want me to, will beg me to. Stop. Just listen. In the days or years to come, you will want to recall as much as possible, or you will end yourself. It is difficult to say. Presumptuous scum! Oh, that will cost you. It'll cost you the knowledge, the burden of knowing his name. He has had so many over his time. Confucius, Moses, George, Siddhartha, gurus, prophets and lamas. But his true name? It is Neos. What? Hush. You will need your strength. You will know as much as I can inflict on you. Listen. I was with him for so long. He was unlike any of us. We gravitated to him, his certainty, his passion. Sometimes we would clash. I would head off for a time. But I could never stay away for long. Well, not until he crossed the last lines. But that was practically recently. I, like so many of us, followed in his comet. We attempted to help him in his great work, his quest. It was always about him, his vision, his goal. He was unquestionably the strongest of us, but some said not the oldest. Yet he was a force of nature. He appeared throughout the times to guide humanity for a period, and there many of us were also, we lesser perpetuals. We were his aides, his generals when needed. Then we would follow him back into obscurity. But one thing always happened. It's easy to spot when time is behind you, a tapestry of records that one can see the pattern of simply by the studying. But we were in the moment. We did not see the weft being woven. A warrior poet earlier in time, a wise ruler or prophet were his later guises. He tried to teach them peace, tranquility, unity and virtue. This is what he claimed. Yet every time we went back into obscurity, back into the shadows, somehow he was always deified. Not immediately, perhaps, but regularly. All forms of faith would spring up around the guises of revelation, the name he took near the end. Many of these faiths were enduring and fanatical at times, and he studied what that did. I did not know it at the time, could not see the stars for the speed we were at. Always onwards, always. We hid and planned, rose and returned, then disappeared again and again. From the first days of bronze, to iron, to the revolutions 3, agricultural, industrial and information. Then, onto the era of true progress. All the while there we watched the wars, the barbarity, cruelty, the suffering, inflicted on our own, by our own, or by outside forces only he truly understood. There was beauty and grace, and so much creativity in all of those epochs. Each had worth, even if taken out of continuity. We watched our race grow and grow up. We walked the streams of history, one step at a time. But for others, the stairs were finite. For we few, we perpetuals, they were an endless road. Eternity gives one an experience and eye that few can ever understand. Then humanity, with some nudging, moved to the stars. We stayed on Earth, what you call terror, until the advent of warp drives. Then the hunt went out into the stars. We never knew exactly what he hunted for. Signs, portents, old ruins, musty crypts, lost knowledge. And not of the technical kind, but the arcane. The ways of what he called the enemy. He knew them all and more. Every last spell, rite, cantrip, curse or thaumaturgy. He knew all. From pre-Neolithic, sun, moon, steel and even high magic. And if any human had ever been a practitioner, then he knew their craft, their wisdom. Yet the search went on, ever on. He hunted for a grail, a place, a corridor between here and elsewhere, behind the veil. He took this quest to the stars, but I was not there by then, not I. His plans made less sense the longer I was with him. He was becoming even more driven with each era we experienced, becoming more frantic and thus more bullish, more direct, less patient of delay. He envisioned a new man, a new race, a superiorly gifted one, a humanity of wisdom and strength, with power enough to defend itself from the galaxy and the terrors that lurked beyond the veil. He became so single-minded, and his vision was now all that mattered. We may always have been bugs in comparison to he, but now he could bear conceal his impatience at even being questioned. Imagine that. To think you are so far above your peers that you are from another race, even as they are mutations that are far beyond the baseline of our race, humanity. No. He hid it before, but now he was too distracted, too concerned, too weighed down to always maintain his polished veneer, his diplomatic stance and patience. He now barked orders like a tyrant, as if to slaves or inepts. And eventually, I volunteered to go on a longer mission, away, and I never returned. I simply hid. I took on the guise of a simple worker and simply disappeared. Until now, of course. I found out later what happened. I spoke with those who went almost to the end with him. He found it. Yes. He found it. In a world in the night sky, he found it. Molech. Some went with him, a one-way trip on an early-era vessel, and he found the place, the doorway across, and he entered it. He went into the realm of evil, temptation, corruption, and power. He walked in the warp, they said. He returned, but changed. None believed it, but he was even more of everything, and it accelerated. But I have few details of then, for the dark times began, old night. And all we knew, all we had witnessed and helped to grow, in the matter of mere centuries it was all lost. The galaxy itself had seemed to turn on us. And then, millennia later, his response plan came into being. He threw off the shadows again. He came to the fore again. And he would lead humanity again. But his plan, it was flawed, as it was built on a lie. It was built on sand, borrowed power, stolen secrets. And it came down when they saw his treachery. That is what so many have been told, what we all believed. He was ours. He was the most powerful of us. He had used them. Or had he? And now, so many again fell to his worship. It swept across the stars of the galaxy near entire. All pray unto him. All feed him their pain, their fear, their hope, their anger, their need for righteous vengeance. He always stated he was but giving them a light, a north star by which to sail, an example. Yet, you see, they all ended up worshipping not the message, but the messenger. He always knew what he was doing. Always. He knew. For he...
Please, enough. Do not complete your line.
I must. Please.
For he is the master of mankind.
Yet to gain such power,
he must have chosen
to serve. And the most terrifying thing of all, perhaps he serves them still, his true masters, the dark gods of chaos. Piter, the Gevasa officer, stood dramatically, deeply breathing in the air. He expelled slowly, savouring the moment. A human, but attired in the colours and cloth of the Tau Empire, with a self-assured smile and a look of determination in his eye. He turned to the 4 tank crew that had sat in this holding camp for the last 8 months. They were not enjoying the sun. They were not inhaling the fresh, clean skies. They did as they always did when he met them. They glared at him. "So, to what do we owe the honour of your presence, Piter?" snapped the leader. "I just thought I'd pop down to see how you're all getting on. Good food, real food, clean, fresh water, walks, placidity. Surely this is better. Surely you can see the greater good in action." And at that, all 4 spat on the ground in unison. It was not rehearsed. It was an automatic reaction at this point, ritualized almost. They had been together here, separated from the rest of the camp, and Piter was always bemused by them. Always. They had so much space here, so much breathing room. Yet every time he saw them, none was more than 5 foot from another. It was almost like their shared bond kept tugging them closer as they experienced more pressure. They were not inside a tank any longer, yet could they ever be said to truly have escaped it? Piter sighed and shook his head. At least he still had one. They had almost put paid to that. That disgusting tool covered in mud. It was going to take his head off. But then, he had seen its wielder explode in a crossfire, dissecting disco of lights, as his own squad had taken the assailant to pieces. His body had juddered as he was struck. A terrible reek joined the stench from the battlefield. Burnt meat. Piter had gotten to his feet in time to pull his squad off them. The tank crew were not going anywhere. They were unconscious, but even so, when he saw them next, they were more dejected than he had ever seen a human in all his life. All because their glorious army of butchers had been defeated. They had been defeated. Their emperor had been defeated. Yet Piter, at this moment, discerned a wry smile coming from their officer. Skipper, as they had called him. He was going to be trouble. He was always trouble. And that he most certainly proved to be. They had taken a relatively small amount of captives, a mere 1,000, give or take a score or 2. The maniacs of the Imperium had mostly fought to the last. Utter insanity. Many escaped. Too many to be comfortable. And these had caused endless troubles of their own. But Piter could not understand his charges. For the ethereal, he had tasked him with a great duty, a great burden. He was to show his fellow humans the light. He, Piter, was to bring them into the greater good. A job he initially leapt at, thinking it would be easy. How could it not be? For his world was lush and green, beautiful and bountiful. Now, because of the Tau Empire, and it was impossible to refute the benefits that had been brought, impossible to deny the good that had been done, all part of the greater good. Yet, he was bemused at it all from day one, but the first weeks were a picnic compared to every day since. Most of the support staff had surrendered. Some soldiery were taken as they were injured. When these were healed and returned to the pens, the soldiers, all hell broke loose. That night there was shouting and alarm. When fire warriors were sent in to investigate, they were jumped by elements in the rabble and pulled apart. The armed prisoners then headed straight for the gates. and it took 5 hours and a score of drones to bring things back under control. We put them all on lockdown, and when we cleared up, we found a dozen men hung in the dorms. Investigation led to a simple conclusion. The returning soldiery had executed the highest-ranked traitors as they could. Only one survived this purge, the tank commander, the one they called Skipper, but nobody would say why. And from that night onwards, they never let up. We separated the soldiery, but still, little changed. We found out eventually that it was this Skipper who was behind most of it. He was a motive force in every attempted break, every tunnel, every concerted push to the gates when our guard was down, or any rush on separated guards. We had to change from fire warriors to Givasa guards. The fire warriors were getting trigger happy, and despite being armed, we humans are bigger. It made the prisoners emboldened seeing them so small, and whenever one of them or a group were killed, it was like blood in the water. So we switched guards. At first, this caused even more issues. The horrific things the soldiery in particular would do to any that they could separate and attack. It was so much worse than the Tau. I could not fathom how or why, but we enraged them even more than their alien slurs. I had no choice but to separate them even further. One camp became 4. One for the genuine soldiery, one for the support staff that were placid, well, generally. One for those who were still more scared of their own, the retribution they thought they would receive if their Imperium returned in numbers. They were still truculent at points. And this Skipper and his tank crew, and annoying little ones, the tiny horrors. They had to be put in a camp just for the 4 of them, and the unspeakable rattlings. They could not be trusted. The rattlings were a plague. Some days they could not be found at all, only to appear the next night, full to the brim and belching in ecstasy, mimicking having been out of the camp. But of course, there could be no way for them to actually escape, nor would they have returned to the pens if they had done so. And yet, so many provisions went missing, so many meals had spoiled, and we guards were subjected to the rear-end growls. Belts were always slack those days, pathways to the latrines kept wide open. But how could they escape? Why would they return? It was baffling. And again, I suspected a secret mind scientist amongst their number. For indeed, they were driving me slowly but steadily mad. Thankfully, the only Ogryn were few. They died in the first nights when the actual soldiery returned to the pens, but 2 were left. As they joined them in the uprisings, and they did not duck, they did not dodge our fire, we blew them to pieces. But 2 were left, Grog and Brog. Both used to spend most of their time with this Skipper. He seemed to be keeping them in line with his crew, but I could tell he was simply saving them to be unleashed at the worst possible moment. So, of course, I had them moved to the more servile pen, and they were astonishingly quiet the entire time, during the day. But at night, they could have bad dreams and then rampage. The casualties could be harsh on the prisoners. I did not order them to be executed. I could not do that. They were so simple, childlike. But I did have them sedated. And within a few days, we had them painting the entire pen structure. Nobody quite knew why there were so many flowers in the walls, but none bothered to really pursue the situation. It was simply not worth angering the 2 of them. The night terrors left them, and all was well in the 1 pen at the least. But not even Grog or Brog were able to accept anything but their emperor into their hearts. The soldiery, I understood. The tank crew, I knew better. I was aware how much this would be a wasted effort. The rattlings. Just annoyed anyone who tried it on with them. I remember them playing along for 2 whole weeks. I was about to consider moving them out of the pens. Things had gone so well in my estimation. But at the last, they used the new clothes that I gave them to create hammocks. They then laughed at me and wandered off. Little bastard. I spent too much time around Skipper and his crew. This is not right. My time was running out. I was not managing it. Their ears were closed to aught I said, but most especially to the greater good. And so, my remit had altered. I seemed to have lost the faith of the ethereals. Of this I had no doubt. But they made me feel useful, probably out of pity. And I was tasked to gain intel instead. Not easy. Because humans in the Imperium are lied to so often, they are quicker-witted than our own of this planet. Their mistrust so ingrained. I did not do well at this either. Not really. I continued my attempt to probe the tank crew. So, Skipper, I've finally been told you led the retreat. You must be proud. I am. More than a few of our boys got out. Yes, they did. But we have them now. All of them. I play to their ego. They fought hard, of course. Ha! Okay, well done. Especially that large tank. We captured it. What? Not Bill? Blurts out the one called Gobby. We cornered it. They had no choice. They surrendered. The officer flares at this, then his expression changes, and he begins to jeer at me, and the rest join in. Of course they do. I look dumbfounded at them, then my jaw drops as the skipper starts to talk. Oh, did they now? What, Captain Arbus, surrender? What a joke. Don't tell me your next questions will be, oh so pretty, eh? How fast do you think it went? Pity it ran out of ammo. It seemed slow. How much can it carry? Guess where we found it. You're here to find out about Bill, aren't you? Because, my lads, he says to his crew, they ain't got him yet. Triumphantly, he leers at me as he says, Bill is still out there, ain't he? And the howling and baying at me leapt up in volume. Ha ha ha! Yeah! I snap my jaw closed, but it's too late. How? Is a skipper a mind scientist? How did he know? He leans back and waves me away. The others take up the motion. I retreat. They've done it again. How I hate these barbarians now. These simple-minded fanatics. We look the same, but that, I assure you, is as far as the connection goes. They know this war cannot end until these scum give up, and they protect the war despite having zero chance of victory. In spite of it all, they are horrors. Night fell and I tried to sleep, the memories of the battle wafting back into my brain. The smells, the first thing to hit me, as I knew instantly that I was indeed in a dream. Yet, the knowing did not make me proof from its power. I swept into that burning day again, of hate and war. The day we toppled the mighty armies of the Imperium. The horrors. The scene had been set, The Mont-Car, the killing stroke, was ready, and the Imperium had fallen for the bait. Our Tau lines held firm at the rear of a long valley, the perfect place for a hardpoint, the perfect place for an ambush. But the force and fury of the human attackers was unlike anything we had seen before. They were suicidal in their rush to get at the Tau facility, and each time we Tau had thought them beaten, that is when they would come on with twice the furore. The tanks had been smashed by our large battlesuits, causing a veritable garden of smoking hulls with their crews spayed out in a hole in the rear of any tank hit. Rail guns, unpleasant but necessary. Yet they had brought up a huge tank, a super heavy of such rarity that none had seen its like before, and it blew the lines of battlesuits to scrap and continued towards the generators. It brought down shields whenever it fired, released deluges of fire into our Tau lines behind. Theirs were taken by we Tau at first, but then the Imperial Navy sent its transports, and they took back control. Onwards they rushed, bringing up Ogryn to cover their flanks, Vostroyan firstborn elite troops in the middle, rattling snipers, taking our Pathfinders' heads off. I hate them so much. I shouldn't, but I do. We had them in the center of the valley. Even their air power was now diminishing. Their cavalry, hideous beasts of burden ridden into battle, barreled into our own encircling forces. It was looking bad, as it was meant to do. Despite the horse troops being a surprise, we had them. Stealth suits penetrated their rear bases and cut the head from the snake. Crisis suits then came in and took out their airfields, and many of the artillery support. Not all, but a fair amount. But the zealots did not break. We had removed all support, trapped them, confused them, were slaughtering them. But they would not break. Our hammerheads came over the top of the valley and fired down. They exterminated most of the remaining tanks, hammered into the lines of Ogryn and elite guardsmen with their strange hats. Yet they could not strike directly at the super heavy. It seemed to radically change course out of nowhere and hug the walls of the valley, out of sight of our hammerheads. And that dratted small tank at the front caused so much pain and panic and confusion. The smaller tank drew so much fire that the blasted super heavy got away, and in the most bloody of possible routes. It veered and took one of the alleys that we thought it would not be able to fit down. It was tight indeed. I saw the branching exit from the valley later. I wish I had not. For multiple of our Firecast cadres had been stationed there in ambush. The tank was so wide, the assault so unexpected, and it rolled over everyone it did not shoot to pieces first. Many Tau warriors died under its treads. Too many. While that happened, the giants, these Ogryn, they bellowed and charged. They had repulsed an assault by our gallant Kroot allies, but now they seemed to just go berserk. Before we could see that it was planned, it was over. Because someone, despite having executed their entire command staff, destroyed most of their ranking tanks, someone had seen what we were trying. Now I know it to be Skipper in my custody. He somehow got them together. While drawing fire from the entire facility and ridges, he got the infantry to fight their way out of our encirclement. On the left flank, this did not happen. Our Pathfinders were too accurate, the Kroot too dogmatic to allow them through, but near half of the remaining force pushed through on the right flank. The Ogryn barreled on, followed by the Vostroyans and many of the Rattlings, but not all. After their escape, for the next week, it was never-ending sorrow. For the Rattlings were still in the valley, in small units individually, hidden deep in the undergrowth. The miserable wretches sniped out our people, as they went to clear the field. Even when carrying away the fallen, the dead, the little runts took one head off, then moved, or went silent and did not fire again. But it was happening all over the valley. We ended up having to release 100 drones to burn every inch to the ground. A vast waste of resources. A burnt scar on the landscape of my world. We searched later, of course, and it was revealed. It was only 11 of them. They had delayed and slain us so much. If they had been captured, they would not have seen out the night. Better they burned and ended quickly. To think that something so small could do so much damage, inflict so much pain. But in the last they were stopped. All of this was distant to me. I was on the central courtyard when they came in. A small tank that seemed to be driven by a crew of madmen, utterly unpredictable, throwing off our scopes. They burned and barreled through anything they could. But in the last, they were stopped. A hit from one of our plasma rifles took out their tracks, and as we advanced on the damn thing, the last infantry supporting the rearguard action, which seemed to be made up almost exclusively by said tank and crew, ran up to support them. But our orderly fire lines tore into the said infantry. Red coats and black hats all bursting into flame and being parched as they were hit by our firepower. The tank crew disembarked as our hammerheads came over the ridge even further. And that is when I struck. I charged them. I wanted to stop them. I wanted to make them pay. I wanted to kill this tank crew. Hand-to-hand combat began, with me at the front. I did not see what exactly had happened with the crew, but one of them came at me. He was armed with a flat metal heart on a stick. He swung at me, and as I ducked under the assault, I was not fast enough. He kept going round in a circle and brought the metal flat up under my chin. I launched backwards. My head hit the ground first, dazing me with lightsome pain. The rest of me followed, of course. But the head was so agonizing. I could do nothing but hold it with both my hands. I thought it would explode. The pain in my broken jaw, the concussion at minimum I would have from the strike on my landing. And when I opened my eyes, my mind cleared. He was standing over me. He aimed the heart shape at my neck. He was going to cut my head off. But lights flashed, and he was hurled backwards as plasma charges smashed him off his feet. He was dead long before he could hit the ground. The others, they had been beaten down, were still receiving brutal kickings from my colleagues. I did not want to move. I wanted to lay there and pass out. But as a ranking officer, I got to my feet. The world swam, my stomach churned. The thought of opening my broken mouth wide was the only thing stopping me from hurling up. But I staggered to one group, and I pulled them off the crewman he was kicking. It spread. We had them. They were going nowhere for quite some time. 4 out of 5 of them was not bad, I thought. We could try them, and I could then legally execute them, if the ethereal would permit it. But of course, he did not. And my dream ends with the ethereal smiling as he orders me to attempt the impossible, to turn these mindless barbarians to the path of righteousness, to bring them into the greater good. I wake, sweat pooled beneath me on my pillow, everywhere. I do not need to see the chronometer to know it is not even close to dawn. I turn the sheets over, trying to gain some dry cover, and I lean back. But something is not right. It is then that I am aware of what I hear, low and distant at first, then louder as it gets closer, and, by all that is good and pure, I feel my gut wrench, my stomach clench, my arms spasm. I sit bolt upright and check. There is no mistaking this. Through the window I can see a watchtower explode into broken kindling. Suddenly ashen-faced, I know what it is. It is the sound of that one terror from my nightmares. It is here. Ethereal's guide and protect us. It is Bonus Bill, the Baneblade. You've got to love it when a plan comes together. Oh yes you do. And this one, it's been brewing up for a long time now. Nice to see all my work has not gone to waste. Oh yes sir. Now, many a marble has had to fall in place for all of this to come off. Patience is a virtue, as they say. But this was torturous. Oh yes it was. Months of planning, months of waiting. But we kept ourselves busy, of course. Initially, I was behind the escape from that hellish trap. Honestly, I didn't expect any of us to get out of that scrap. Of course, one of us didn't. And the Oggs took a pure hammering something fierce. Poor dim bastards, but tough as old nails, as they say. But, infamy itself, we got taken. And when we recovered from taking our lumps, they didn't even have the decency to execute us. Tau vermin. Wanted to play all nicey. Codswallop. So I set out on my own little long war. And by heck it's paying off. Tau dominated humans. Poor saps bought by baubles. Clean. Fresh air. You worry about clean, boy. Food? Fresh, you say? Does it help me kill Xenos faster then? No, thank you very much. I'll have the protection of the Emperor, if it's all the same to you. And so, we began. I was always several steps away from any activity, but I called those shots. And some of the fuzzies helped out for a bit, till we was all broken up. But, by the Emperor's grace, the stuffed shirt in charge, Piter, only gifts me with the ultimate blessing, doesn't he? He gives me the ratty boys. Oh, yes, he does. And from there it's sanguinala every day since. The silly boy. He didn't know what we were going to unleash on him. Now, one compliment, mind you. That Piter, he's a cool one, all right. Never ordered culls or warning executions, no matter what we did. I guess he's not all bad, but bad enough. Xenos-loving scum. So, I gets to making sure the ratty boys confuse the camp to guards the issue, and of course, their number. And when next they go out to play, they carry a good head for the landscape out there. Days bleed into weeks, weeks into months. But we keep at it. Ratties can skip off when they want, but we stick about to gain info. And genteel Piter is always on hand to help out too. We know exactly what he wants. He's about as subtle as a drunk squaddy approaching a damsel, so we interrogate him more than he ever gets anything out of us. But this is the big one. Because we gained intel from ratty spies that our boys were close. So, off a couple went to have a natter. Carry my message, at least in part I hoped. Incorrigible little tykes, if they remembered any of it. But back the ratties come. So we send out responses. Only 2. Little fatties are good, but best not to risk it, eh? And that paid off. In spades. Because we are now all waiting, anticipating. And there he is, the unmissable, poetic, beautiful rhythm of his tracks approaching. It is indeed the one, the only Bonus Bill, the company Baneblade. He rumbled forward, and as he came out of the dark, things started exploding left, right and centre. The gun nests are first, of course. Smashed by a heavy bolt of fire. The main buildings pop one by one as Bill introduces himself and his main battle cannon. As he is now clear in view, the dark comes alive just past the fence, and a few explosions later, and the main columns are down, and the fields drop, and we, the Tau prisoners, are out into the night. I plough forward, but am stopped as I get closer to the bonus one. I want to give that huge Baneblade a kiss, and I'm not alone, but there it comes out of the night, a chap I recognise, one of the intelligence lads. He quickly barks out if I've brought my crew. I nod, so do the boys, and then he tugs us around old Bill, and bless me, there it is. Towed in as agreed, but still a shock to see it actually happening. I thought all of this was but motivational grog stung, something to tell us to put, some lead back in the pencil. But Bill has bought us a new lady. Oh yes he has. She ain't a stunner, she ain't a shiny new one, but when I set eyes on her, I stand back. I feel the lads around me, next to me. I throw my arms around the two closest, and it passes on. And we, as a group, we bask in her glory, just for a second. I am smitten. I'm in love. And I see that same adoration in the lads, as we look at her with dumb grins on our faces, like she was a sister of battle in a shower. She's gorgeous. And she's all ours. And she is a Malcador heavy battle tank. Now, not once did the blueberries ask themselves why we were here. Oh, they have the same whiff of arrogance as the Eldar about them, but they don't have the experience to back it up. So they underestimate us at every turn. We were barbarians, right? No need for a reason. The Imperium of man just attack anything different to them. Stupid. We always have a reason, we humans. But we, as a race, as an army, have been around the block. We don't signpost our plans and motivations now, do we? No, we don't. We came here, this planet, as a start. This is the forward party only, and we were told to try to take this world as special, 'cause it's an armory world. What does that mean, eh? We got stuff down here locked away from even the eyes of the locals, beyond their scope to remember it's even here, let alone where it is. Ranks and ranks of stuff hoarded up low, deep in the ground. And my beautiful brothers in arms have not only found it, but brought some of these big ladies out of mothballs. Praise be to the Emperor. He does indeed provide. So we jump into her and we make friends. She is already fired up, but we take control. Now she ain't as versatile as our first gal, our lovely Russ. I will always miss her, will. But getting a crack at that nippy Bernie tank, wow, that was more fun than I'd expected. And now I feel we have been prepared. Because this old girl is as fast as a Bernie, but heavier than even a Russ. She'll need pointing a lot more in the right direction, of course. But she ain't half also going to be a thirsty gal. But right now, after so long, Grumpy, Gobby, and Ears all look to me, and I beam down. We know their local reaction force has a hammerhead. It's less than 10 minutes away. We can go put a stop to her gate crashing the party, Or we can stalk about until they show themselves. Take a clean shot. But it risks bonus bill. And that sounds like a tardy way to repay his assistance. Oh, yes it does, says I. Let's get some revenge in. Go to them, says Gobby. No rebuttals come. All right then, lads. Let's do this, says I. As a Baneblade Bill trundles through the camp, it continues its rampage. Town forces arriving piecemeal are slaughtered. Their light vehicles smashed, their makeshift lines exterminated. All as it makes its way to the attached airfield. This raid was not about us captives, us prisoners, not initially. It was about destroying resources. A very clear, happy happenstance for all, thinks I. Because when they found out where we were, oh yeah, they were going to attack twice as fast. So, we race off next to a tower road. The Malgador had muscles and broke through hedge, tree or outcrop with ease, and within 6 minutes, we were in position, laying in wait. And just as the Ratties had reported, the sleek Tau hover tank came zipping along the track at a phenomenal speed. I raised my hand, and all watch it as I then lower it. The main battle tank cannon tore out. Gobby tried to sink in another shot straight after. Grumpy and Ears blasted out with heavy bolters and autocannons. Shot filled the air. Some of it even hit. The thing was struck, but continued its speed at least. It wobbled and spun. I thought it might hit the outcrops of rocks, but it steadied itself again almost instantly. And that is when we ploughed directly into it. We shot forward into its path. Why? Well, blue boys don't make things tough now, do they? All the shields, all the spells, all the moving round. All very nice. But it relies on them being paper thin. And we couldn't be guaranteed to take it out by boom booms alone. And, as planned, this hammerhead struck our top, spun over it and slammed into the rocks. It plumed with a strange green fire as it went up. Smashed. All aboard killed, of course. And we turned our guns on the advancing support infantry. Splat, 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 they went under our fire. It felt good to take some payback. And the new girl was indeed fast. As we revved and rammed more of them down, all for the protection of Bill, of course. A sort of homage to how he left the valley all those months ago. Little blueberries bursting, bursting, bursting under our tanky, tanky, tanky. But soon they ran out. The event over, the camp opened, the airfield done for, and the reserves crushed. Well, we scarper. It's time to link up our little guerrilla forces together again, because our second wave is coming. Oh yes. And we have all the firepower we now need from the stocks that were left on this planet so many years ago. Blue boys are in trouble now. Oh yes they are. And we are linking up with Bill. But stop off to have a shufty about for someone special. I was only half dressed when the first explosion hit the building. It was followed by raking Imperial fire. Men and women erupting into the corridors were near the front. They exploded as bolt shot hit them and transformed them into offal. Bags filled with blood, their contents splashed across ceiling, wall and floor. I slammed my door closed and dove for the window. Out of it. I was mid-air when the second round hit the building with such force it sent it flying over me like a wave of masonry unmade. And I came down hard, very. Fire had brushed my body, scorching, but not lighting. Ringing in my ears. I could not hear. All I could see was darkness above, fire around me. I put my head down and crawled. Ash was falling, thick as storming snow. I was clawing with the only arm I had left that worked. The other was numb, with some shooting pains at the shoulder, I gulped when I moved wrong. This led to inhaling ash and smoke. I racked with coughing, everything lit up with pain. I slowed. I could not endure much more. Then, a stinging dull thud in my side, and I'm on my back. Pain. I open my eyes, slits against the ash snow. And there they are, above me. I cannot hear it, but their mouths are open, their tongues out. They are making that derisive noise again. I know it, but because the tables have turned, they now have me. A boot slams into my face. I lose consciousness. I awake in pain. I cannot breathe through my nose. It is smashed. One eye will not open at all. My arms are tied behind me. Agony in my shoulder. My ribcage also. They must have put the boot in while I was passed out. I taste dry copper on my tongue. At least I still have that. My tongue. The ringing is bad, but I can hear. And I hear his voice. I am in a dark, dank room, somewhere deep within the earth. A synthetic light is above us, a table before me, a chair beneath and behind me. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty." It is Skipper. Why am I alive? I did not think I had said it. I thought it. You, Piter, are alive to receive a great choice. Because, you was good to me and the lads. But you did get one of us killed, and you are a filthy collaborating traitor. So your choices aren't expansive. In fact, they're only two. I can see he is relishing this, but beneath it all, some kindness. Perhaps I have had some small effect on he and his crew. Something that will grow, perhaps, and be an unstoppable tidal wave of change one day. I do not die in vain. So, he continues, the lads have been thinking, and we boiled it down into two options. 1. Driver, because it's simple, and we need a new one. 2. Death. We pass you over to the commissars and they execute you. Not great, I know, but not all bad, eh? Once fast, at least. I nod. Then I painfully straighten my neck. I bring my head up, and I look at him as solidly as I can in the eye. I'd rather be dead. After everything you said to me? All talk, was it just, eh? Anything is better than death. Why not choose life? You hypocrite, says he. But you respect me more for it, don't you? He nods. Oh, yes. Has to be said, I do. But then, we had to rub off on you eventually. You are human after all. I refute that we are anything alike. Oh, yeah, that'll help. You do that. He beamed at me. Then his face darkened. The smile did not leave it, but it twisted. His eyebrows contracted. He looked demonic. Well then, Piter, this is the route we are going to take. You'll die then. But because we all like you so much, we reckon you should still be our driver. He then whispered to me, it doesn't take much thought, you see. I passed out. I woke, but I could not move. I had no idea how much time had passed. I just looked up at the light above me. I could not feel my body. And there they were again, all 4 of them, making their horrid noise at me. I could not move. Skipper then barked an order, and I could see myself rise, my arms pulling me up. My feet touched the ground. I cannot feel them. I walked toward him. I was not in command. I could not feel anything. He gave orders I could not understand. It was as if he was so far away, yet he was stood just before me. I could see him, but barely hear him. And off I went. My body my prison. I was carried by my body outside. I watched as it got into the front seat of the tank, and sat there, unable to move. I could feel the drool coming from the side of my open mouth. I could not close it. How? How does this serve the greater good? Then they get in. They expel gases on me. They spit on me. I can do nothing as they bruise my body. At a command, my body pushes the accelerator forward. My body drives the tank. Betrayed. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. That simple, that obvious. And I, an angel of death, and Astartes, a space marine. I want to curse the heavens for the perfidy of the pathetic. I want to howl my anger into the skies, to decry the injustice. I want to weep for the future, if only I were capable. A thing besmirched by this present state of affairs. For we, the greatest warriors the human race has ever known, we, the most orderly and disciplined sons of the 7th Primarch, we, his celestial lions, are being wiped out. It is not the Xenos, nor the Neverborn, nor the traitors who seal our fate. It is our own who are doing this, our supposed allies, our own species. They may not be pulling the triggers of shooters, nor assailing us directly with weapons in hand, but we are undone, and it is the invisible hand that strikes us down. And it's all so obvious. They respect us so little. 1, 2, 3. We arrayed for war, deploying all that remained of our number, a full half of the chapter still. Usually enough to quell rebellions system-wide, usually enough to win any battle. And the war leaders, they brought every asset we had left. Every last rhino, predator, land raider, whirlwind and dreadnought. They brought it all. This was to be a battle not just for the Mannheim Gap, but for the very existence of our chapter. We gambled it all, everything we had, in this last desperate throw of the dice. Or that is how most below Pride leader felt. What they knew, of course. I knew otherwise. I was one of the rare non-rankers who did. We had been betrayed. In a million different negative turns of circumstance, Lady Lark had turned her head from us. Or so they said. Yet, this was not the truth. Not really. We are not the Lamenters. We were not the cursed albino Vatborn. The universe despised us no more or less than any who fought under the banners of the God Emperor. As I said, it was as obvious as 1, 2, 3. The Mannheim Gap, the war at Armageddon. The orcs had returned. in numbers and strength that had not been seen in thousands of years, if ever before. Their fleets blotted out the stars. Their armies of rabble moved in such hordes that it was as if the ground itself had risen and marched towards us. Carpets of green, howling madness marching. They struck near everywhere. Yet, we contended with them mightily, both we celestial lions and the others present. The Steel Legion fought them to a standstill time and again. The Salamanders, Blood Angels, and our brethren, the Black Templars, all had sown such destruction on the Greenskins that their annals, their rolls of honour, would be over-burgeoning. Yet it was never enough to merely weather the Orc storm. For if one does not root them out, annihilate them all, then their landing sites, their nests, begin to blurt out weapons of mind-twisting power, their strange defiance of reality a horror if left untended. The Orcs had been pushed back time and again, yet the Manheim Gap, it was still in their hands, and from it they were preparing to send out entire columns of Orc Gargants, their colossal equivalents of the Quaestorus Knights. Orbital Recon had identified scores of the beasts about to be brought online. So we, the Celestial Lions, were tasked to take the Orc encampment, to smash and slaughter everything there. 1, 2, 3. Finally, we were prepared, all in position. The mark was given, and instantly all hell broke loose. We churned through the mud and dust, our column thrusting into the depths of their camp. Yet they charged out of buildings, erupted from the woods and brush above the valley. Their response was so swift, it was impossible for it to be hidden. They knew. They were ready for us. 1. They came out and met us head on. Yet, were we not Astartes? Were we not the most holy celestial lions? We tore through them. We brought righteous slaughter to the Greenskins. We did, until the mountains around us moved. The Gargants. They were not being constructed. They were not being brought online. They were ready. And at point-blank range, they unleashed hell on us. The kind of firepower that brought down hive walls, the kind of ordnance that topples titans, the kind of horror that saw entire millennia of experience deleted in the flash of an eye. I witnessed as blast erupted from the behemoth beings and slashed through our lines. Lakes of plasmatic fire dropped onto our tanks, melting them and all who attempted to escape their fate, merely wallowing in the burning flames. Entire trenches of ground tens of feet wide torn apart by the Orc cannons. Squads disappeared in a heartbeat. Formations were gone in mere moments. 2. Yet, despite all the turmoil and furore, the confusion of the clash, I noticed it. Few did at first, but soon the knowing swept down the lines. I watched as my war leader fell forward, his head smoking. When we turned him, his head had but the one hole in it. Then, moments later, my pride leader also fell backwards, his head a mess of burning metal and smoke also. I dove for cover, but I looked at him as I did so. There, in the center of his helm, the burn hole that only a high-precision energy weapon could produce. And our leadership was shot out from under us. Orc fire, some said. But what Orc uses a sniper rifle, let alone a laser or energy-powered one? No. 3. This was number 3. Somewhere out there, someone was sniping out our officers, making sure our chain of command broke down. The confusion would take hold of our entire formation, and it was not the orcs. It could not be. This was number 3. They had brought us here, to the Mannheim Gap, to die. Here was not our operation, our task, or our objective. Here was our tomb, and we walked into it. And less than 70 of us would walk out again. Dreams of the Future. First Minister Perseus Thorman looked dolefully at the entourage as they entered through the Arch of Victory. Despite efforts to sweep the floors, remove the most obvious evidence, there could be no obfuscating the reality. This, his people's greatest achievement, the Hall of 100 Heroes, had taken its fair share of punishment. The bombardment had started at the very moment the image of their ambassador went dark on the comms. For Perseus had taken the temper of his people, and they wanted to resist. They, like he, had no conception of the magnitude of the power of their conquerors. He spat his rebuttal into the face over the communicator, and then they fired. No hesitation, no moment of pregnant silence for any to catch their breath. But that was not the worst of it. The next 98 minutes had been a constant catalogue of positions and formations annihilated. The expeditionary fleet of this Emperor of Mankind had been terrifying, not merely in its raw destruction, but also in its peerless precision. They stripped away the defences, then the military command structure of the planet with contemptuous ease. Reports of bases then being taken by land forces came flooding in, drowning the central command in woe. The sky then darkened over the capital itself, as ships in low orbit blotted out the sun and dropped a carpet of teardrops onto the surface. Each metallic droplet dispensed a decury of death. 10 warriors without pity or weakness, who could sustain a direct hit from a field gun and shrug it off. Their handheld weapons punched through armor and emplacements alike. And the First Minister's honor guard surrounded the Hall of Heroes, he at its center. 10,000 of them fought for another 3 hours, but they were crushed in detail. When the last of them were backed onto the very steps of the hall, his generals broken, none could look away from the butchery on their screens, none thought to do what had to be done. That is when First Minister Perseus Thorman signalled the final surrender. In less than 7 hours, his world had surrendered to the fleet, unconditionally. To their credit, the assailants ceased fire almost the moment the last word of his declaration left his lips. They withdrew to the edges of the city, with a martial exactitude so swift and sure it was a marvel to witness. And the minister then prepared himself. He would personally hand over the high sword of office to these things. For how could they be anything but ravening butchers, those who could mete out such punishment? And all were both afeared and awed by what came up the stairs toward them. A man, yet not. A being of seeming perfection, dressed in armor like his warriors, yet so finely filigreed, so beautiful of feature. He was like nothing they had ever seen before, and he was huge. Yet he moved with a grace that could barely hide his suppressed threat. Did he need an army at all? Thought the leader of his world. Perseus knelt and held up the blade of office, the ultimate expression of the fighting spirit of his entire culture. The being moved forward and gently took it from his grasp, so lightly, like a delicate gift had been received. He spoke but the one word. Arise. A voice like waterfalls in the Paradise Isles, a face to match. As First Minister Thorman stood, he looked into the eyes of the man who had conquered his world in less than a day. Yet, he was shocked at what he found there. Deep eyes that shone with, not the rage and hate that Perseus had expected, Was it pride? Yet not in itself or its own men. The being nodded at him and then bowed back. So tall, its head came down close enough to the minister that it was able to whisper, "Do not be afraid. I come not to hack, but to heal." It then straightened, but as it did, it rose the hand of the minister, and together they stood with their hands raised together in victory. The being then turned and projected towards the remaining leadership of the newly conquered world. "I am Primarch Fulgrim. I lead the armies and fleets on and above your world. I come from my father, the Emperor. We come from the greater human race." "You have fought like true sons and daughters of humanity. You did not cower. You tested your strength to our conviction. Yet now, the price has been paid. You have learnt that you cannot continue alone. This is a moment to rejoice over. We welcome you back into the fold, and yours will be a bright and beautiful future. We bring you into the bosom of our entire race. We welcome you into the Imperium of mankind." An hour or more passed as we all stood and signed documents with great pomp and pageantry. Then we both climbed to the office of the First Minister, this Primarch Fulgrim and I, and we were alone at last. He strode to the desk, turned to sit upon it so he could look at me, respectful while being dominant. The throne would have buckled under his size. I stood before the seat of the supplicant. "Before you are seated, your artificers are skilled, this room sculpted to perfection. So, tell me where you have some of your finest liquor hidden, eh?" His eyes shone and his eyebrows bounced. I could not help myself but chuckle as I pointed at a part of the wall. He smoothly glid toward it and pressed his palm calmly on the wall, releasing the latch. Before I knew it, my hand was filled with a beaker, and that filled with a potent wine. He raised his own filled beaker and winked. "A nasty business is war. I bet we both need this." He drank, and I followed suit. This being had just orchestrated the slaughter of thousands of my people. He was intimidating in every possible way: size, intellect, poise, power. Yet, I was already warming to him. He disarmed me so adroitly. I marveled at his statescraft as we spoke on. "Let us cut to the nub, shall we?" he said. I took a deep breath, and the wine helps me speak plainly. "I would appreciate that. Don't coat it in honey. What happens now? Heads on pikes, pikes on walls? Me, I know, but how many more?" He raised an eyebrow and looked at me. "We're not barbarians, Perseus." My mouth opens unbidden. "You say that after what you have done today?" He stops smiling, yet there is a softness to the face, the words he speaks next. "I know this is hard. Someday I hope you will see it differently. As my brother always says, the most kind war is cruel. We strike with overwhelming ferocity, aye, but we do so to shorten the wars we wage. Had we fought slowly, and by what you might consider honourably, then the carnage would have been thricefold or more. We had to disavow your people of the thought that they could resist us. You know that they would have fought to the last man and woman if you had not seen the truth so swiftly. Imagine how many millions of your people you have saved by surrendering. For every one of your brave people who was slain, 99 can stand proud of their memory. And what now? Your people will be exposed to all of the wonders of the Imperium. We are hundreds or even thousands of years ahead of you in technology, medicine, economics, art. We will raise them up. The cost? Their freedom, I barked. Their compliance, for a time. While we still need to wage wars to conquer the galaxy, there will be sacrifices, of course. Every human everywhere must do their part for the Great Crusade. But when it is over, we will create a paradise of this world, as with all worlds. The claim of every despot who has ever lived. He does not snarl. He even laughs. Touché, my future friend. But this time, oh, this time, it is true. Your people will be treated with dignity and respect. They must work, but they will do so for not only our benefit, but their own also. We build a brighter future for all of humanity, and I am impressed. Many ask about their own future, not that of their people. I did not think I would have one. You have options. How I spend my last moments. At this he snorts derisively, yet not derogatorily, as he fills my beaker to the brim again. Of course not. Your men fought well. Your people will be a credit to the race, but you also deployed them well. You were bold enough to fight, but wise enough to know when you were outmatched. And you did not put your own interests above theirs. You showed the right steel. In my father's realm, incisive, honourable leaders are always in demand. But not here. Oh, you are clever. Now I know we will be friends. Just so. Such a man as you could provide an issue if your loyalty was ever tested. So remove the man from the temptation. Again, just so. Yet, when one looks not down at the refuse of our tussle, but up into the stars, the potentials, the challenge, the adventure, you are very young to lead a planet. Surely, there is room for more for you. He looks deep into my soul. It's like speaking with a terrifying version of myself. And it is meant to be thus. If this is the Emperor's diplomat, my gods. I would be a liar if I did not look on post office years as, well, a bit barren, perhaps. Then let us drain these drinks, and I shall save you from a future of public speaking and perfect shrubberies. Say on, Fulgrim. Say on. We are moving out into the universe like an explosion of light. Our fleets go out in every direction. Yet, it is all unknown. We redraw the maps with every moment. What lays beyond our terrain is still a mystery to us. You need trailblazers, forerunners, says I, barely able to contain my excitement. You'll get ships, men, support, and the rarest thing in the universe. I raise my eyebrow. A writ signed by the Emperor of Mankind himself. A warrant of trade. Because you, Perseus Thorman, have just about the right stuff to be a rogue trader. Duel for a dynasty. I bark the order to my crew. Forward! Full speed ahead! Aye, Lord Thorman! They state in unison as they scurry into action. I run my ship like I run all my holdings. My word is law. Their duty is enactment. No one thinks to resist my will. My flagship comes out of hiding behind the moon's shadow. We are above our quarry. Ha! Catching them fast. I sit in the throne of command. My seneschal stands at my shoulder. A tad early, perhaps, my Lord Aaron? He breathes so none but I can hear. Not this time, Bancho. You'd have us wait until the opportunity had passed us by. A battle is like a new lover, my friend. One must leap when the time is right, or forever regret the caution. How poetic, my lord. But lest you have forgotten, she is a much larger lady than we are used to, no? Yet, like all, She will swoon when struck with the right words in the right circumstances.
Your spy came through.
Let's see, shall we? Gunnery, prepare to concentrate all fire on the upper buttresses. Ignore the main body and engines. Aye, sir.
If you are wrong, our salvo will do naught but take off statuary and struts, my lord.
Indeed, Banchel. But if I am right, I want there to be something left to lead my fleets in the future.
If she turns on us fast enough,
we're dead. I know as well as you. But then, this is why I am the Lord, and you are the Seneschal.
I thought that was due to the eminence of your birthright, my lord.
Poppycock. The blood gets me into the seat, but it's never kept anyone there. That is what the balls are for.
I'm sure the dynasty will thank your balls in the future, if you pull this off.
That they will, Banchel. That they will. The Mercurial was an Avenger-class Grand Cruiser, an ancient ship of the line. It was lethal in close quarters, able to sustain hits that would obliterate a lesser ship. Captained by the other contender for the throne, Maximilian Thorman. A duel was the only way to prevent a catastrophic war of succession. I had permitted Maximilian to board the Mercurial before I declared my challenge. Not known for his grit or gumption, old Uncle Max would have run for the void if I had taken the Mercurial first. Yet, I knew my Lunar-class cruiser like the back of my hand. What she could do, when, where, and how. And I had left many of my own people in key positions on the Mercurial, let alone my spies. How had this all begun? The assassinations had started even before my father had been taken to his bed, the slow wasting illness suspected to be the result of high living and inactivity. And thus, the field had been culled economically. My two younger brothers had died in a fluke engine failure, their transport crashing into the sea mid-transit, never to be found. My mother had been obviously poisoned, though all politely went along with the story that she had died of a broken heart, wishing to be first to the Emperor's side to prepare for the coming of my father. I retaliated in kind. And one of my cousins was strangled to death in a back alley leading to his favorite brothel. Uncle Max's favorite was always his daughter, so I seduced her. She was to be my wife. Yet, Uncle Max wanted his youngest, Sebastian, to inherit after he had his time at the top. So, I had him thrown from his favorite tower not 2 nights previously. It was said that he had somehow survived the fall. It was a kindness when he was given the Emperor's peace. Though over 100 others could claim some whiff of right, all knew it was only I and Maximilian. And so, the duel was offered. Before we both went through these hundreds of other claimants in tit-for-tat executions, or worse still, battle broke out between the factions that would see the resources of the family squandered in self-destruction. This had happened before. The great Thorman dynasty almost utterly capsized and dropped into obscurity by a rash of succession wars. Over 1,000 years ago, we had only just recovered, to be honest. So, I decided to end it before it got spiteful and strung out over decades. The only way to get the old coward out of his lair, I lured Maximilian into thinking he could not lose. My Lunar-class ship, the Righteous Fury, coming out of nowhere, anchored above the Mercurial, I had caught him dead to rights. Normally, the void shields on the Grand Cruiser would make this act almost pointless. "Fire all torpedoes!" I barked, and off they went. The massive cylinders ploughed through the void between the ships, then struck. From the Righteous Fury above, the void shields looked like an egg of kaleidoscopic webs, as the first torpedoes impacted. The fields blazed again and again. Then they blinked out of existence as the last missile just sliced through them and struck home. This is how it would look, of course, that I knew differently. My men had lowered the shields. The last torpedo detonated amidst the highest spires, tearing off one entirely before becoming a mini star of plasmatic destruction. "Whatever you paid that man, it was not enough," gasped my seneschal. "Oh, I gave him an offer he could not refuse, Benchal." The Mercurial spun down, with flame gushing out of most of its top decks, and a message came through from their secondary bridge. "Maximilian is dead. All hail Aaron, Lord of House Thorman. We stand ready to obey his every command." "Every command indeed," sniffed the seneschal. "There is no crewman more loyal than the one who has just seen a traitor executed, Benchal. None at all." The War of Succession was already over. A new beginning. It had been thousands of years. House Thorman had seen its highs and lows, as had most of the great houses of the rogue trader dynasties. Yet somehow they had endured. Over all of the millennia, they had not only survived, but thrived. Now, they commanded a fleet the likes that the local navy would be wary of confronting without cause. They would, of course, but not without a damn good reason. 2 grand cruisers, a score of cruisers of all tonnages, heavy, standard and light, tens of escorts and transports, merchantmen, even factory and mining ships. A veritable fleet by anyone's standards. Millions of men under arms, warriors every bit as disciplined and drilled as regiments of the Astra Militarum. And in this instance, they were not alone. For the call had come out. A call that only one man could make and be heeded. Over the millennia, these rogue traders had all grown to eclipse the power of any local lordling or governor. But none could deny this call. None. It came from a legend from a mythology as old as the Imperium, a hand that had written half of the warrants of trade that made these forces possible. One who had met with the Emperor himself, one of his own, one of his primarchs. The call went out from the avenging sun, Lubute Gilliman, Lord of Ultramar, the Lord Commander of the entire Imperium. And so, the rogue traders gathered over the skies of Ultramar, and they asked themselves the same questions. Would he requisition the lot of them, force them to join his indomitous fleet? Scuttlebutt was as varied as it was spectacular. A new age had dawned. The son of the Emperor had returned, and all knew that the old ways were gone now. He would change everything. Perseus Thorman the 23rd had played his hand well. He had had his face altered as a young man, so he was the very image of his ancestor, the very first Perseus. He had emulated his feat in the propaganda at the very least, and he had kept a vice-like grip on his authority. Yet now, in this place, he felt as small as the lowest chapter serf or menial, for his gaze was filled with the sight of him, the Primarch. Surrounded by other rogue trader lords, Perseus was amongst good company, for the Lord Commander moved amongst them like a particularly jovial shark. All knew that no power under their command could ever harm or halt him. He was like a walking vision of the elder days, and he knew it. Yet, afterward, all would remark the same. Despite being lords of all they surveyed, despite none present ever having to take orders from anyone ever, they all fell into line.
not because he had overwhelmed them, not because he had ordered them. No, because he had implored them to remember who they were and why they existed, to recall the fires of passion that had brought them not only their bull of trade, but had given them the fortitude to survive through the ages of darkness. He, the Primarch, had asked them to rekindle the ashes of their very being, to find their strength of old. He did not want them to give over their power to his command. He did not want them to fill in where the Navy or his crusade fleets could not. He did not ask them to stand watchdog over old lanes and old worlds. Instead, he threw down the gauntlet. He asked them to go forth again, to ply the unknown voids, to seek out new worlds, new realms for the Imperium to colonize. He asked them to go back out into the black and bring the light of the Emperor with them. And Perseus was transformed that day. All of the rogue traders were. Where before they snarled and sniffed at one another like a collection of alpha wolves, now they shook hands with grins and discussed their courses outward. How they could assist one another, how they could work as one. Like the old days, they remembered the old ways. When humanity looked out into darkness and said, "You are ours, we will take you all." And Perseus remembered the feeling. Some would be lost on the way, some would fall, some get lost in becalmed or stormy squalls of the warp. Yet now, things had changed, and they, the rogue traders, would be the forerunners, scouts, heralds, and, to the enemies of the Emperor, they would be doom again. A new age had indeed begun. Humanity was back.
I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. Throw me a like and subscribe if you want more of the same. And no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.